Hello.
Good morning, it's 4 a.m. UK time. I'm about to introduce Jason Wee, who will be discussing the role of the Marine Surveyor and P&I Club perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you fine.
Loud and clear.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for this invitation to share with you a little bit on what we from the P&I Club view the role of the Marine Surveyor. And many congratulations to IIMS on their first ever Marine Surveying International Fest. And I hope it's not going to be the last. It's so far been a very exciting morning. I've been coming in and out and popping in to see. So it's been great to have this fest going on. By way of introduction, sorry, I'm trying to get the clicker on. By way of introduction, the Standard Club has been providing mutual third-party liability insurance to our members, comprising ship owners, charterers, managers all around the world for over 130 years. And the Standard Club is one of the 13 international, of the members of the international group of P&I clubs, which together ensures over 95% of the world's ocean-going merchant tonnage. Our HQ is in Bermuda, and we have Standard UK based in London, and then we have Standard Asia, both subsidiaries of Standard Bermuda based. Standard Asia is based here in Singapore. Now, the Standard Club alone, just for those of you who fancy numbers, insures about 10% of the world's ocean-going merchant tonnage, and we here in Standard Asia holds an entry for about 1/3 of that, so about 3% of the world's ocean-going merchant tonnage. In terms of tonnage, the Standard Club is the 4th largest P&I club in the world, and as you can see. And as a mutual insurer, our ethos is to provide insurance on a non-profit basis, on a mutual basis. So that is reflected in our combined ratio of 104%. It means effectively for every dollar that is being paid in premium, $1.04 is being paid out. This is the ideal, of course, would be for every dollar paid in, every dollar is then paid out, and then you get the 100% ratio. But this is well within the acceptable margin of appreciation of 104%. It's a very stable club. We are rated A strong with a AAA capital strength, and that's important for when you're insuring with your clubs, because clubs will have to put up securities and letters of undertaking for claims. We have free reserves, a healthy amount of free reserves, and we have had no general increases for the last 2 years. The club also invests a small amount of the premiums and their reserves, and this is a healthy result there. So that's just a quick introduction on the Standard Club. Now, for those of you who are acquainted with your classical stories of the Greeks, you may remember, gentlemen, the tale of Theseus. Theseus was, of course, well known for slaying the Minotaur, and the story goes that after Theseus slayed the Minotaur, every year thereafter, an entourage would be made to pay homage to Apollos for Thanksgiving using the ship of Theseus. And the ship was, of course, laid up, and it will undergo surveys every year, and where necessary, parts of the ship will then be replaced. So then the question then comes on as to, when all of the parts have been replaced, is the restored ship still the same as the original? And that was known as the ship of Theseus paradox. I'm not entirely certain whether that is the origin of marine surveying. Perhaps not, but it is a romantic tale, and I thought it may be of interest to note that the marine surveying profession is one of great antiquity, and marine surveyors still carry on looking at whether surveying a ship, whether she is seaworthy or not. So, first question to ask, I suppose, who is a marine surveyor? For the purposes of this presentation, it will include club surveyors external surveyors as well. And then the next question to ask is, what is marine surveying? And for this, I turn to the definition provided by IIMS very helpfully. And it says the service provided to maritime and transport organizations in general, and the production of guidance reports for all other bodies connected with maritime operations or maritime trade. As far as a P&I Club is concerned, we receive service from marine surveying in both the form of guidance reports as well as services in general. And this presentation today, we'll look at what are the roles of the marine surveyor in terms of the P&I clubs. So the contents of today's presentation, first we'll look at it in three parts. There's, of course, the first part, which you'll be looking at ship standards and risk review surveys by the surveyors. So we have what are the surveys that are conducted by the club, whether they be by in-house surveyors or whether they be by external surveyors. Secondly, there's also the role of the surveyor in promoting loss prevention and raising safety standards. And this is across the board. Again, both internal and external surveyors have a role to play. Thirdly, the role of the marine surveyor would also be examined in terms of operations of the member and claims surveys. So when we have a P&I incident, what is the role of the marine surveyor? How can they help to minimize loss? So the overarching role of the marine surveyor in all these three aspects of it is loss prevention. But how that role is then manifested in each of these aspects, we will have a look. If we have time, we'll cover a very quick case study. So on to the first role is ship standards and reviews. Now, the P&I Club, as I said, works on the basis of a non-profit-making, member-friendly, mutual basis. So imagine there is this big pot, which consists of premiums or calls, as they are known in P&I parlance, plus investment income, which the club then invests a little bit of the sums. So that should balance with the amounts in the pot that is then paid out by way of P&I claims, plus the expenses of running the club, which would include salaries of the managers, myself, and as well as other expenses that the club has. So that is the formula. So if we want to have a very cost-effective insurance, one way is to reduce claims. If we reduce claims, then logically the calls, premiums, would then be correspondingly reduced. And this is then the role of the surveyor to help to maintain the fleet quality and operating standards. One way that our surveyors in-house at the Standard Club assist is they work very closely with the underwriters. They will have an assessment of the vessels that come in onto our books. These vessels, we are very selective as to the types of vessels and the fleet, and there is an assessment that is being carried out. And this is what you see is what we call the DRAT tool, the Desktop Risk Assessment Tool, by which a set number of criteria are being examined by our surveyors, and they go to a point system. So they give a point for a particular thing, and then you add up the points. And that will be discussed with the underwriters, and it sort of sets the pace for the direction of and risk appetite of the clubs. If you have so scores are given from between 0 and 4, and higher score is better, a lower score is worse. And so premiums can then be adjusted as to what would be a suitable premium if in fact this vessel is going to come on entry. So that's the first role of the club surveyors, to assist to ensure that the quality of the fleet is of standard, and that the risk appetite corresponds with what the club is prepared to underwrite. Our surveyors, external surveyors, also are required to assist with class, ensuring that the vessels remain in class and are compliant with requirements of flag. That is stated in our rules, and those references are references to the standard club rules, but the similar provisions exist with the other clubs within the international group of P&I clubs. So external surveyors, class surveyors would carry out surveys on the vessels, and that's the first role to ensure that we have a fleet not of rust buckets, but of a decent sized fleet. So that's class and flag. And if they don't comply with class and flag, then cover becomes compromise. It becomes discretionary, meaning it's no longer automatic. If an incident were to happen and the vessel is out of class or non-compliant with requirements of flag, then the club can turn around and say, right, cover, we will have to take a report, and we'll have to send it up to the board for their decision whether or not the club is going to cover this, since you're out of class or non-compliant with flag requirements. At the Standard Club, we have also what is called here the MRR, or the Member Risk Reviews. Studies have shown that there's a direct correlation between the quality of members' operation and P&I claims. For new members, or where there has been a significant change in the operations of the members, the MRR is then scheduled for the member, and this is carried out by our club's internal surveyors, or at the members' offices or their managers' offices, to review the safety and environmental management systems. This is really an embodiment of the whole mutual ethos, where the clubs actually come alongside the member, try to understand the decision-making processes, try to understand the challenges that the member faces, and then say, look, maybe this is one way you can improve your operations, with a view to more efficient loss prevention methods being employed. So that's the member risk review. It's not for all members, but only new members, and where there's a significant change in operations. That's one role that's played by the internal surveyors of the club. There's also ship risk reviews, which are carried out over new ships. So in terms of the IG has certain criteria, and one recommended is ships which are over 12 years old on entry. That's just one example. There are other criteria. And it's a sampling of ships across the club that will undergo these ship risk reviews or loss prevention reviews. And it can be carried out both by internal club surveyors or external surveyors. These are the aspects that will be inspected in ship risk reviews. Look at the hull, the operation procedures, SMS systems, security, accommodation, etc. So what happens if a member does not cooperate to allow a ship risk review or member risk review within the period stipulated? Again, they run the risk of club cover being compromised or being discretionary. And in the case of new ships, the club has the option to decline the application, or to impose conditions, or to refuse renewal or entry altogether. One other role of the surveyors can be seen in the pooling agreement. The pooling agreement is an agreement between the 13 members of the international group of P&I clubs. So where one IG club terminates a vessel's entry or declines entry to a vessel, and that vessel is subsequently entered with another of the 13 IG clubs, the first club would have the option of writing to the IG and saying, we would like the vessel to be assessed for determination whether it meets the criteria of a designated vessel. The International Group Committee shall then constitute a committee comprising barristers, lawyers, and surveyors within 14 days of nomination. They will look at a certain set criteria to assess the vessel's seaworthiness and whether or not she would fall within the definition of a designated vessel. Now, if she fails to successfully pass this inspection, or she is not presented for an inspection, she will then be termed a designated vessel. What is the effect of this? The effect is that the club, the new club, which has taken on entry of this vessel, will have a double retention. Now, under the pooling agreement arrangements, each of the 13 IG club will retain liabilities, the first 10 million within their own clubs. Subsequently, above that 10 million, that will be shared as between the 13 IG clubs under the pooling arrangement that they have. Beyond that, it will go up to a reinsurance program, all the way up to currently about 7 billion. But where a vessel is termed a designated vessel, the retention of that new club will, instead of 10 millions, be doubled to 20 million. And this is the role where external surveyors appointed by the international group of P&I clubs have a role to play. This doesn't happen very often, but there it is on the books. Now, what happens after 1 year or upon redetermination and the vessel remains a designated vessel? That vessel will then become a prescribed vessel and will lose the international group pool cover. So everything, all liabilities will then be solely on the new club if they decide to keep the vessel on entry. So that is the first role of the P&I, the surveyors, in terms of ensuring a quality fleet and ensuring that rust buckets are not within that fleet. The second role of surveyors would be promote loss prevention and raise safety standards. Here at the Standard Club, there are many loss prevention initiatives, similar to other clubs too, and also external surveyors. So we participate here at this, our loss prevention team participates in Intertanko, Intercargo, ITOF. They sit on committees, discuss what are the recent challenges, and contribute what we can in terms of our experience, in terms of our expertise. We also run campaigns such as Be Cyber Aware at Sea. We support these campaigns, which raises awareness as to what are latest challenges. That something as simple as putting a thumb drive into the ship's navigation system and what risks there are in doing that. We support studies on human elements as to why things go wrong at sea, and what we found out is a lot down to human error and what steps can be taken. There's FIDRA Films, whom we work with in producing films for like the human element, or also Be Cyber Aware at Sea to raise awareness. There are navigational audits, member trainings all year round, all around the world, wherever our offices are situated. We have pre-employment medical examination schemes for the crew of our members in selected jurisdictions to ensure that the crew are being screened properly before they join the members. So these are all the initiatives of our loss prevention in club surveyors to prevent losses. Quite another great initiative of the Standard Club is to have a safety and loss advisory committees. We recognize here at the Standard Club that many of our members have great expertise within their staff. And so in 1992, we decided to draw on those resources and those expertise by having selected senior technical operation directors of our membership to meet about 3 or 4 times a year both in Europe and in Asia to discuss what are the problems that are being faced in terms of loss prevention issues, what steps can be taken. It would discuss specific cases and ask the views of these advisory committees who comprise very senior people with vast experience. And with this feedback from the committees, they will set the pace and the direction for our loss prevention initiatives within the clubs. Sometimes they will also advise the board in terms of whether, on a technical issue as to whether a particular claim, a discretionary issue, for instance, what would be the views of the advisory committee in that regard to advise the board. So that's one of the resources where we have at the Standard Club, and it's driven by our loss prevention team here at the Standard Club. So our surveyors, or the loss prevention team, works very closely with the underwriters, as we said, to ensure that we have a quality fleet. We underwrite insurance for a quality fleet. And they also work with the claims people. Myself, as a claims director, I work very closely with our internal club surveyors when handling claims and having to answer technical issues. I'm maybe well versed with the law, but there are still many technical aspects for which I need to consult our loss prevention team. They are a great resource. So moving on to the third role of our loss prevention team in terms of operations and claims. Now, the role of the club is very much, I like to view, is a bit like a hub in the middle of a bicycle wheel, or the Houston command center, where we have a 24-hour service. We manage claims as they come in at any time of the day, any part of the world. And then we give instructions to appoint correspondents, surveyors, experts, or lawyers. And decisions are then made through this structure called the club. And the club also has the safety and loss prevention team to provide advice both to the members and to the claim handlers and lawyers as well, as to how a claim might need, what are the issues to be live to when looking at a P&I incident. So you may be well familiar, most of you may be familiar, but for a quick recap as to what are the risks that are covered by a P&I club. So under a P&I cover, we have the usual personal injury, collision, wreck removal, damage to fixed and floating objects, berth, wharfs, pollution, cargo damage, shortage, fines, stowaways. And then we also provide defense cover, which may be disputes on charter parties or bills of lading, speed and consumption. In both, whether it's a P&I or a defense dispute, surveyors have a role to play. However, surveyors should be live to the differences in terms of club cover for P&I and FD&D. FD&D is only a cover in respect of fees, the club, and it's wholly discretionary cover, and the club will look at the merits, the enforceability before confirming cover before confirming support of the club by way of fees for each stage as the matter progresses. By contrast, P&I, if the cover is automatic, then club cover will control both the claim and the fees. Although there are many types of claims that you have just seen, most of the claims could be analyzed by way of looking at it quite similarly to a child, the growth of a child to an adult and then to death. So we break it down in these terms: birth, childhood, adulthood, and death, with those following timelines. The first 5 hours, we receive a notification of a claim, and it goes on to up to 1 week, up to 3 months, and by and large, most claims resolve one way or another within 1 to 4 years. So what is the role of the surveyor at each stage of the development of the claim, as we have just seen in this life cycle of the claim? Before an incident happens, I would think it would be very helpful for the clubs to be familiar with their correspondence, with their service providers, including surveyors, to know of their expertise. It would be very helpful if surveyors could come around to say, look, we can do things very cost efficiently, and these are standard service level agreements that we have. External surveyors could provide free advice, consultation, or talks on which are jurisdiction specific to where they operate. There are also before any incident occurs, surveyors are also instructed by clubs to conduct operational surveys on behalf of the member. These surveys may or may not be paid for by the club. For instance, you have rice or sugar discharge surveys in Africa, or preloading steel surveys or in wherever the load port may be, the member may come to the club and say, could you help arrange for it? It doesn't fall within P&I cover, but the club assists with these instructions and will pass it on down to the surveyor. So the surveyor should be live to who am I being appointed by, and who will be paying my fees. So one other point I'd like to make is that with the club, most surveyors are appointed via correspondence. There is a great deal of trust within our network of international correspondence. And with surveyors, as I understand, there isn't a formal way of qualifying or competence tests or accreditation, call it what you may. And so with the clubs, we rely heavily on the recommendations of our correspondents as to which surveyor would be suitable. But that having been said, we also appoint surveyors directly, those we are familiar with. The next stage of the life cycle of the claim would be after the first 5 hours. One would expect our surveyors to be clear on their instructions, know who is appointing them. As I said, is it the club or the member? And that little picture over there, am I a vegetable or fruit? Would be a good reminder is to ask the question, who's my principal? The club or the member, or both? What about coordination during the first 5 hours? Who else is going to attend the survey? Is it a joint survey? Who else do I need to contact before going on for the survey? Some of these questions seems very basic and trite, but we've had experiences where things have gone wrong, where these basic questions have not been given some thought. Up to the first week of the incident, you would have surveys being conducted perhaps on board or on shore or in the warehouse. Look the part of the surveyor. You're representing the club, our members, and we expect you to go out there looking the part of the surveyor, being very clear, introducing yourselves to the crew, your scope of survey, your mandate, and informing the crew as to what involvement they will have, if any. Bear in mind also that whatever you write may attract legal privilege. Recently, there was this case of the Serious Fraud Office, in ENRC case, where it says that internal investigations may not, in a criminal proceedings, may not attract legal privilege, such that it would need to be disclosed to the other side. Thankfully, that has just been reversed a few months or so ago by the Court of Appeal in the UK, and it says that even where you have a dispute and it's an internal investigation, that report may attract legal privilege. So, but just be live to the issue. Does what I'm writing in my report, is it privilege in terms of, do I need to disclose it to the other side? So if you mention in your report that there's a dispute and there's potential claims, and that the lawyers have also come on board to discuss these matters, given the advice, and there's a higher probability and prospect that your report will be protected by privilege and need not be disclosed to the other side if matters proceed to litigation. Some other guidelines, I suppose these would be well familiar with those of you who do surveying, but you'd be surprised sometimes just to see how we still receive reports with photographs, but not much annotation as to what's going on. And we still have to chase surveyors as to, please, can we have an update here at the club? The other point that I like to if in the event of joint surveys and you're sent to one of our memberships and there will be other surveyors on board, we usually give very strict instructions to the members and to their crew not to allow surveyors on board until they have identified who they are. And it has been some cases where we have opponent surveyors coming on board and the crew weren't aware that they were actually opponents surveyors rather than their own club surveyors. And the other issue is the control of documents. The club would be more comfortable if there is one channel by which documents are being exchanged between both parties. And the document ideally should go through the lawyers after a discussion with the surveyors. Obviously, having good cooperation with the other service providers is a given these days. It may be not just the lawyers, it may be cargo experts, it may be naval architects that the surveyor today would have to work with. The next stage would be up to 3 months of the life cycle of the claim. At this point, there will be, one would assume there'll be some written report. Do keep within the scope of instructions and be clear what is the scope of instructions. Sometimes the scope of instructions may change in the course of development of the claim. What we at the club appreciate is, as early as possible, do provide estimates of the claims, estimates of the exposure, because very early on we would have to put a reserve on our books as to how much this claim. It can be adjusted. It usually often does get adjusted in the course of proceedings, but yeah, that's something we definitely would appreciate, having estimates of how much on the most likely outcome, how much might the club be exposed to. Another good practice is to use the phone. I think sometimes it's just too much. It's being exchanged by emails. We get flurries and reams of emails, and sometimes this could be avoided if one just picks up the phone and say, look, we have this issue. What do you think would be the way we would like to discuss it going forward? So that's another little pointer that I have. Administratively, billing cycles do ensure your bills are regular rather than receiving one huge bill at the end. I think, but that's something to work out on. Do ensure, if you have a service level agreement in place, that the hourly rates are in line with those, because these will then just put a spanner in the works and slow up the processing of bills here at the club. And ensure that who is instructing it. Is it the member? Is it the club? And sometimes it could be our Standard Asia branch. Make sure the addressees are correct. The billing arrangements, the bank details are all there. In these days that we have all internal compliance to follow, and we need to have all these details correct before fee notes can be processed. So the claim then comes on to a resolution between, on average, 1 to 4 years. Very small percentage of claims actually go all the way to trial, arbitration, or mediation. And the role of the surveyor in helping to resolve, after giving their reports and initial views, if matters progress to this final stage, could be at least two ways. One, the surveyor himself or herself could be appointed as the final arbiter of facts or quantum. So for instance, if we look at one example would be damage to the ship's paintwork by cargo, and it would be the ship owner and the charterer having a dispute, saying, look, we don't know whether the damage was probably pre-existing or was it caused by the last cargo on board in the holds. And we agreed to appoint a surveyor. We don't want to go to court. Can you, Mr. Surveyor, please look at the reports on both sides and can do a desktop exercise and give us your impartial opinion as to where causation of the damage lies. And on that basis, we will then agree to allocate responsibility to each party. That's one way a surveyor acting as an arbiter. Another means could be in court or arbitration. The surveyor could be asked to be a witness of fact or an expert witness or both. And it would be another important thing that we value at the club is our surveyors being upfront about us, about their court or arbitration experience, because not everyone can withstand the rigors of cross-examination, and it would be better to own up early rather than to have to inform us later in the day, especially where great stakes there's high stakes in the claims, and many a case have collapsed because of not having witnesses who are able to perform, if you like, in court or arbitration. So, as I said, this is a decision of the Singapore court recently. It says, can you, as a surveyor, be an expert witness and a witness of fact? So the answer seems to be yes, you can. You can be both an expert witness and a witness of fact when you're in the box. But you have to be clear which part of the evidence you are giving is pertaining to stating merely the facts, which part of the evidence you are stating your opinion, having looked at the facts. And in that decision, I think the court took some exception that the witness wasn't quite very clear as to which part, what evidence he was giving, facts or opinions. Now, the duty of the surveyor is, they are there to assist the court with their expertise, irrespective of who instructs them or call them to testify as the expert. And there is nothing wrong for the surveyor advising the party appointing them, their principal, what is the case that their principal would need to meet, what further evidence they would need to bring out to strengthen their case, to meet the arguments of the opponent. That much is fine. However, the surveyor must always remain independent, and I mean, it need not be said that you can't put words into the expert evidence mouth or the surveyor's mouth and then expect him to regurgitate that during trial. So that would only reduce the credibility of this evidence, and it would be self-defeating, as said in this decision of the House of Lords in 1981. So we have the life cycle of the claim and the role of the surveyor. What happens after the claims have all been solved? Is there any role left for the surveyor? Yes. Here at the club, we look at a few thousand cases every year, and what we study are trends. And I spoke about the Safety and Loss Advisory Committees, the SLAC group. They, together with the loss prevention team, would look at trends, whether they be steel claims in Houston, whether they be rice cargo claims in Africa, or whether they be crew claims pertaining to a particular fleet or ship, or it could be something as trivial as ladders on board ship, or something a bit more serious as to suicide cases amongst crew. And by reviewing and analyzing, because we have the bulk of the cases, we can see, is there actually a trend? And then we can confer with even the international group level or with other industry bodies to see, is there actually something that can be done at a higher level to improve loss prevention methodologies or steps. And this is shared through articles, seminars, and you can find our resources online. They're all there for free at the Standard Club website up here. Right, so having gone through what the role of a surveyor is from the perspective of a P&I Club, perhaps we have a look at one of the case study. I think we have a little bit of time to look at a case study concerning damage to a pier. This would be covered under the P&I, and there is damage to fixed and floating objects. Sorry. So what you saw there was an incident of a damage to a private wharf, which was heavily damaged, and It's just one of the examples, not exactly, it's a hypothetical one that we showed, not exactly a case of ours, but damage could look something like these over here. And so the question then arises, what are the lessons to be learned, or what are the issues to be live to? So this happens, let's say in Thailand, and one of the issues that the club would then look at, do we need a local surveyor because of language differences? These are some of the considerations that would go through our mind. I think we would need, apart from just a master mariner surveyor, we would require a civil engineer, but then would we need a specialist marine civil engineer type to look at this? Would our club letter of undertaking be sufficient in this jurisdiction? So for instance, in Thailand, a club letter of undertaking would not be accepted, and they may demand for monies to be paid into court or to be held in escrow by a third party pending the resolution of this claim. And in the meantime, the vessel can then be arrested as security. We are looking not just at the claims in respect of the damage to the wharf or the berth, but we're looking at the claims in terms of downtime, and that can be huge, depending on whether there's an alternative berth or wharf, and seasonal concerns and weather. So using that same methodology of looking at claims, the birth, childhood, adulthood, and death, if you look at it, the first 5 hours, what would happen? We have member informing the club getting a correspondent on site, the correspondent appoints the surveyor, and we establish that this P&I cover is going to be activated. What is the scope of survey? Do we want joint survey? Who are the other expert service providers that we want? What about sharing of surveyors' fees with the hull underwriter, since presumably the hull would have also suffered some damage? This being a private port, we need to look at special access permits for entering the local port. As I said, local or foreign surveyors or both, other professionals on standby. Up to the first week, we'll be managing the work with the club. The surveyors would be expected to liaise with us in managing access of opponents and their service providers. Recommending, it would really help if our surveyors could recommend, if they are in that jurisdiction where they operate, be able to recommend who are the service providers, the civil engineer, underwater divers that are reliable, that can be used. Of course, the club relies on their network of correspondence to advise, but a surveyor who knows of other service providers and are, more importantly, better able to work with them is also important. Then again, the old chestnut of being able to estimate the extent of damage, repair costs, and duration of loss of use on a most likely outcome basis. That would be very important, because immediately at the club, we would have to be looking at how much is this going to cost. And depending on how much it's going to cost, there would be reports internally that would need to be prepared. Up to 3 months, it'd be the stage of finalizing the report, and whether your report surveys within scope. Surveyors would presumably have assisted in advising on the strategy for resolution. What are the possible claims here, and the counterclaims even? Is there, let's say the pilot was on board, could there be a claim against the pilot? What about claims from the charterers, the cargo interests, whose cargo and delivery of cargo on board may have been delayed? So in terms of this claim, how could the claim be resolved? One way, it could be through a lump sum payment. Sometimes, and we've had experiences where the port might say, look, I don't want a lump sum payment. I want you to go and appoint the engineers and the contractors to repair the berth. And at that stage, the surveyor's instructions would then alter. The surveyors would not just be there to assess the damage and the exposure, but be there to monitor the repair works and to confirm has matters progressed as to whether each stage of the repairs has been properly completed. Then to notify the club will then release the payment for that repair for the next stage. So that's one strategy, or it could be, as they say, there are many ways to skin the cat. And so the surveyor who is appointed will also have to be flexible depending on how the dispute is then resolved to then provide that assistance and continued assistance accordingly. So let's say it was a repair method that was adopted and the repair was completed within a year or less. There will be final inspections by both sides and probably the local authorities involved. Receipt and release drafted and signed, and the club security is then returned. So it might be an initial security by way of LOU, if that's accepted, or if not, it's paid by cash into the local court. The amounts may then differ depending on the surveyor's assessment. It may be that both surveyors agree actually the amount of damage is not as great as initially thought, and that's another role of the surveyors to assist in coming up with your report to pitch the quantum of security at the right level. And so we come to the conclusion of it. What is the ideal surveyor that the P&I Club would be looking at? And we've gone through quite a lot of material, but I think a very good quotation can be found by the IX papers here. And it covers not just competence, talent, integrity, firmness, but I think it's someone who's also able to dispense justice in carrying out his obligations. So I'm happy to take any questions. I think we have some time left. Is there anyone there who might want some more questions?
Thank you very much, Jason. We're open to questions if anybody's got anything.
If there are none, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for your time for joining us today. We'll be back shortly with Nick Park, and I think I've seen Nick online. Hello, Nick, are you with us?